Saturn was running. The old ruler of the gods had lost his kingdom, and somewhere behind him, his own sun controlled the sky. That sun was Jupiter. And the strange part was that Saturn had spent years trying to make sure this moment could never happen. Saturn had feared one thing above everything else: a child powerful enough to take his throne, just as he had taken power before. So when his children appeared, Saturn chose a brutal solution. If no possible heir remained free, no heir could challenge him. But Ops refused to surrender her youngest child. Instead, she wrapped a stone like a baby and placed it before Saturn. Saturn swallowed the deception. Somewhere beyond his reach, the child he feared was still alive. His name was Jupiter. The Romans knew these figures as Saturn, Ops, and Jupiter, although much of this family story reached Rome through Greek mythology. That matters because Jupiter was more than a renamed Greek god. For Rome, he would become the great divine protector of the state. But that future was impossible while Saturn remained king. And before Jupiter could challenge him, he first had to survive childhood. Tradition placed the hidden child on Crete, far from his father's immediate reach, protected while Saturn believed his plan had succeeded. Every year Jupiter remained alive created the very danger Saturn wanted to destroy. The child was growing. Saturn's mistake was growing with him. Eventually, hiding would no longer be enough. Jupiter faced the first real question of his story: stay safe or return to Saturn. Safety offered Jupiter survival. Returning offered something much more dangerous: the possibility of freeing the family Saturn had tried to erase. Juno, Neptune, Pluto, and the other children were still trapped by their father's attempt to protect his rule. Jupiter could remain the survivor, or he could become the threat Saturn had spent so much effort trying to prevent. He returned, and now Saturn faced something he had never expected to see. The child, he believed, was gone standing before him. Yet defeating Saturn was not Jupiter's first move. Before he could build an army, he needed to give his own family back its freedom. Ancient accounts disagree on exactly how it happened. In one later tradition, a potion forced Saturn to release the children he had swallowed. One by one, Saturn's solution collapsed. The children he had removed from the struggle suddenly stood together against him. For Saturn, this was more than a family rebellion. It proved that the strategy protecting his throne had failed completely. For Jupiter, however, freedom was not victory. His brothers and sisters were alive, but the older generation still controlled enormous power. The struggle now became larger than father against son. Two generations of divine power were moving toward war. And here was the problem. Saturn still had allies. Jupiter had freed his family, but that did not make his side stronger enough. The rebellion Jupiter had started could now destroy him. If he lost, Saturn would have no reason to spare him twice. The old gods and the new generation prepared for a struggle remembered as one of the greatest divine wars in ancient mythology. Jupiter was becoming their leader, but leadership alone could not break Saturn's power. He needed force, allies, and something Saturn did not expect. Neptune could fight beside him. Pluto could fight beside him. Juno could stand against the old ruler. Yet the balance remained dangerous. Imagine the choice. You have escaped your enemy, returned, and started a rebellion. Now you discover that courage may not be enough. Would you attack harder with the army you already had, or would you search for power in the one place everyone feared? Beneath the world lay Tartarus, a prison associated with beings so dangerous that the old rulers had kept them chained away. Among them were the Cyclopes and the Hundred-Handers, ancient beings whose strength could transform the war if Jupiter won their loyalty. Among them were the Cyclopes and the Hundred-Handers, ancient beings whose strength could transform the war if Jupiter won their loyalty. And this revealed something important about Saturn's system. His enemies were not always destroyed. Some had simply been locked away. That meant Jupiter had discovered a source of power created by the old order itself, prisoners with every reason to oppose it. But releasing them was not a harmless decision. These were immense supernatural forces. Once free, they could not simply be placed back in chains. Continue the war without them, and Saturn might win. Release them, and Jupiter would gamble his future on beings his enemies feared. Jupiter made his choice. Instead of preserving Saturn's prison, he went down to break it open. The gates of Tartarus represented more than a prison. Behind them stood the forces capable of changing the balance of the entire war. Jupiter freed the Cyclopes. He also brought the Hundred-Handers into the struggle against the generation that had imprisoned them. The reward was immediate. The Cyclopes did not simply join the rebellion. They armed Jupiter and his brothers with extraordinary weapons. For Jupiter, they created thunder and the thunderbolt, the weapon that would become inseparable from his image for thousands of years. Neptune received the trident, a weapon perfectly connected with the power he would later hold over the sea. Pluto received a helmet associated with concealment. Suddenly, Jupiter's side possessed weapons unlike anything it had carried before. The war had changed before the next attack even began. Jupiter had turned Saturn's prisoners into allies, and their knowledge into weapons. This was the mistake Saturn could not reverse. Every chain he had used to protect the old order now worked against him. Ancient tradition describes the conflict as enormous. Earth shook, the heavens burned, rocks and divine weapons filled the battlefield. But Jupiter now possessed something more important than raw strength. He had changed the structure of the war. Saturn had built his rule by removing threats. Jupiter was building his challenge by connecting them. Only one system could survive. The next confrontation would decide more than a throne. It would decide which generation controlled the divine world itself. Place yourself beside Jupiter now. Behind you stand former prisoners, freed siblings, and weapons never before used by your side. Ahead stands your father, the ruler who tried to erase you before you were old enough to speak. You can retreat and perhaps survive, or you can attack and risk everything on one attempt to end the old order. There is no safe option anymore. A failed rebellion would leave Jupiter and his allies at Saturn's mercy. Jupiter chose the attack. The hidden child was no longer fighting simply to survive. He was fighting to replace his father. The thunderbolt crossed the battlefield. Neptune's new weapon joined the struggle. Pluto carried the advantage given by the Cyclopes. The Hundred-Handers added overwhelming force, hurling massive stones against the Titans as the younger gods pushed forward. This was no longer the uncertain rebellion Saturn had faced before. The balance had moved toward Jupiter, and then the impossible became visible. Saturn, the ruler who had feared losing his throne, was beginning to lose it. The Titans were overcome. Some traditions placed the defeated powers in Tartarus, under the guard of the very beings Jupiter had released. The reversal was complete. The prison once used by the older powers now held members of their own defeated generation. Saturn had tried to stop the future by consuming it. Instead, One surviving child had ended his rule. Victory created a new problem. Removing Saturn answered who would not rule. It did not automatically answer who would control everything afterward. Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto now represented the three brothers at the center of the new distribution of divine power. According to the traditional division, Neptune received the sea. Pluto received the world of the dead beneath the earth. Jupiter received the sky. From above came the thunder and lightning that already marked his victory. But Jupiter became more than the god assigned one region. In Rome, his authority would rise above almost every other divine power. He became the great god of the sky, thunder, oaths, justice, and the protection of the Roman state. Later Romans honored him as Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter best and greatest, at the heart of their public religion. Generals looked toward him. Political authority invoked him. Victories and promises could be connected with the god watching from the capital. The child hidden from one terrified ruler had become a divine symbol of authority for one of history's most powerful civilizations. And beside him, in Rome's Capitoline tradition, stood Juno, his sister and wife, and Minerva, his daughter. Together, Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva formed the Capitoline Triad, one of the central sacred groups of Roman state religion. Jupiter had reached the highest position, but one question remained. What actually happened to Saturn after his defeat? If this were only a story of victory, Saturn might simply vanish here. Roman tradition gives the defeated father a much stranger ending. He leaves the celestial kingdom. The ruler who once feared exile is now the exile himself. Virgil tells of Saturn arriving from Olympus after losing his realm and fleeing the power of Jupiter. His destination was not a distant place forgotten by Roman audiences. It was Latium, the region connected with the future rise of Rome. That creates the great irony of Jupiter's victory. Defeating Saturn did not remove his father from Roman memory. It brought him closer. Ovid also preserves the tradition that Saturn was driven from heaven by Jupiter and found refuge in this land. And this is where Saturn's character changes. The terrified ruler of heaven becomes a very different figure in Roman Italy. Roman stories remembered his reign in Latium as a golden age, an ideal period of peace, order, and abundance. So the same Saturn who devoured his children in the Greek-shaped family myth could also represent prosperity in Roman tradition. This contradiction is not a mistake. Roman religion often absorbed older stories and reshaped gods whose identities had existed long before. For Jupiter, that meant victory had an unexpected consequence. His father survived in memory, not only as a monster, but as a lost king. The defeated ruler had lost heaven. Yet on the land below, another chapter of his myth was beginning. Look back at Saturn's first decision. He believed the safest future was one in which every possible rival was removed. That idea seemed logical from his position. A king without challengers cannot easily be overthrown. But Saturn could control bodies, prisons, and thrones. He could not permanently control what his own fear created. Every child he attacked gained a reason to oppose him. Every prisoner he created became a possible ally for Jupiter. Jupiter's greatest advantage was not simply that he possessed stronger lightning, it was that he united forces Saturn had separated. That is the real turning point. The thunderbolt matters, but Jupiter only receives it because he first decides to open Saturn's prison. Power changed when the resources of the old system became weapons against that same system. It is a human pattern as well as a mythic one. Fear can protect authority for a time, while quietly creating stronger opposition. But the story is not simply saying Jupiter was good and Saturn was evil. Roman tradition makes the picture more complicated. Saturn could be remembered as a dangerous father in one story and as the ruler of a golden age in another. Jupiter could overthrow him in myth and still rule over a Roman society that continued to honor Saturn with an important festival. The gods did not disappear when a new god rose. Rome layered their stories together, and Jupiter stood above that complicated world. Think again about where Jupiter began. Not on a throne, not carrying lightning, but hidden because his own father feared his existence. The stone saved his life. Ops gave him the chance to grow, but survival alone did not make him supreme. He returned for his family. He entered a war. Then he made the decision that changed the balance completely. He freed the forces Saturn had imprisoned, accepted their help, and received the weapon that became the symbol of his authority. After victory, Neptune ruled the sea and Pluto the underworld, while Jupiter became ruler of the sky and leader of the gods. Centuries later, Romans would look toward Jupiter not simply as a mythic warrior, but as a guardian of order, law, promises, and Rome itself. His eagle and thunderbolt became symbols instantly connected with divine authority. Above the Roman world stood Jupiter, best and greatest. Yet somewhere beneath the glory of Jupiter's victory remained the shadow of the father whose fear had started everything. Return now to the image from the beginning. Saturn is defeated. He leaves heaven. Jupiter has finally become the power Saturn feared. But Saturn does not disappear into darkness. According to Roman tradition, he travels toward the land where another story will be born. That land is Latium. And generations later, in that same region, the city that worshipped Jupiter above all others would rise. Rome. So what would you have done? If you were Jupiter, would you destroy Saturn completely, or let the defeated king live in exile?